Hello and welcome to the Space Between Ideas. I'm Blaine Gates. Welcome back to our series on reading books, getting smart, and making a difference in this world. We are still in the book. The It's called The Wealth and Poverty of Nations. Let me jump into the share screen so you can see what is going on here. Here it is. The wealth and poverty of nations. So let's take a look at this little at the thumbnail. So today we are going to look at invention, the invention of inventions. If you looked at the past 4 weeks in our video series, we talked about geography. We talked about some of the problems of growing up in Africa, some of the advantages that came from people in, for example, in Asia and in Europe that live in a better climate. And we talked about some of the history about warfare and farming and all those kinds of things, kind of like the foundation behind cultures. And then suddenly, what's going on here? So we got two different sections we're going to talk about today. One is the technological catalyst, and one is the cultural divergence. All right, so we're going to talk about water. 5,600 water mills. What are water mills? We're going to look at spectacles, something I've been using for a long time. We're going to take a look at the clock, the world's first digital device. Looks like down here we have things like gunpowder, printing, libraries, and the difference between the China Islamic application and the European application. And then we're going to talk about cultural divergence, talking about fragmentation versus totalitarianism, printing explosion, and the mindset of dominion. Yeah, it's fascinating trying to understand what our world is all about. So let's get started. I'm just going to change this view a little bit. All right. Well, my head's kind of in mind that my head is a little bit in the way. All right, the medieval tech boom. Forget the cliche of a dark interlude between Roman grandeur and Renaissance brilliance. Between 1000 and 1500 AD, Europe quietly became one of the most inventive societies in human history. Progress didn't arrive with a dramatic announcement, it arrived quietly in a mill, a lens, and a clock tower. It kind of reminds me of life right now in the world because I feel like we had just this boom of innovation over the last. I mean, since I've when I grew up when I was in high school, I had like a little Motorola phone, little flip phone. So I remember when my dad got his first car phone. So I mean, for us, it was interesting. We were getting phones in our cars, phones in our hands. It wasn't until I was in China in 2006 or 2007 when I had a classmate that had a iPhone 1, or maybe it was an iPhone 2. I didn't get an iPhone 4 until 2012, and then boom, the internet just exploded with applications and communication and Facebook. I got onto Facebook in 2008, and then all these other social media applications, and everything was just moving online. And nowadays everything's online. And it just happened kind of slowly. So let's take a look at what happened in the medieval tech boom. Capturing energy on every hillside. The 1086 Doomsday Census recorded 5,600 watermills in England alone and a supposedly backward peripheral island. What is a watermill? Decentralized energy network. Rain fell everywhere in Europe and rivers ran everywhere. By multiplying the Roman water wheel across the continent, medieval society gained an unprecedented decentralized energy network. And this is an interesting point because the more I read history and the more I try to understand how the whole picture fits together, the more it's a story about energy. and derivatives of energy. Hold on, I guess turn that alarm off. All right, so one wheel powered infinite application. So imagine you can have this. You can have like this water at this time. Water in this situation is equivalent to electricity or gas. Okay, so imagine this is an engine from a car. So if this was an engine from a car, then it's called an internal combustion engine. Internal combustion engine means that you're turning gas into fire, and then fire is going to be pushing some kind of motor. Okay, so instead of water pushing the wheel, it's explosions of fire pushing the wheel. And then now we have electricity, which electricity, it uses electrical current to push an engine, but it's all basically the same idea. It's you're turning one form of energy into another form of energy. And in this case, it says, look, it says grinding grain. So grain hopper, flour shoots, flour shoots, flour shoots. So on the first level, you have this water wheel, and it's grinding flour, and but it has like this drive shaft that goes through their entire house. So then on the next floor, it's pounding cloth or mashing hops for beer. On the third floor, it's hammering metal and rolling sheet wire. And on the fourth floor, it's pulping rags for paper. So they have one drive shaft. You can imagine this is almost like a car, and you have one drive shaft, which is driving multiple inventions around the whole house. It's quite amazing. The paper mechanization distribution. Paper had been manufactured by hand for 1,000 years along its trade routes from China. Europe mechanized paper production, and the moment the material arrived, no other civilization had even tried. So this looks like it's like the world's first real invention was it's called leverage. How do we leverage? How do we use something like free energy? There's free. It's almost kind of like solar power. We already have solar power. We have the sun shining down on us. How do we use that sun to turn it into energy? Water, there's a river right outside of my house. Okay, so how do we turn that water into electricity? It's amazing. Defeating the biology of aging. Around age 40, human lenses hardens. Historically, master craftsmen, scribes, weavers, instrument makers went blind to find work right at the peak of their experience. Huh. So it takes you 40 years to figure out, like, to gain enough knowledge to be able to produce something. And then right at the moment when you figured out like how to do it and make money from it, then suddenly you go blind. Not 20 years since there was discovered the art of making spectacles, one of the best and most necessary arts in the world. Pisa, 1286. Spectacles are invented by connecting two magnifying lenses. Europe maintained a monopoly on corrective lenses for 300 to 400 years, effectively doubling the skilled craft workforce. That's interesting. I mean, so I've thought about this many times in my life. What life would have been like for me if I wasn't able to have glasses, because even now, like my right eye, uh, I can see better now with my right eye than I have ever been able to see before in my whole life. And it's because when I turned around around 25, I recognized that my brain was only using my left eye because the difference of vision in these two eyes was too great. And then eventually what happens is your brain, it just turns off. It just stops using this eye. So then I had to change my glasses so that this lens was as good as it can get, and then this lens, it's like it was weakened so that both eyes are about equal. And it was only by making the glasses like this. So this is not 2020 vision because this one, it can't reach 2020 vision. So I got this one to match. I got this one to match this one. So I don't see 2020 vision, but it's like I can see three dimensions. I remember the first time I saw in three dimensions. I was in Shanghai. I was doing my internship at a law firm called King and Wood, and I was in the park across the street, and then I bought these new glasses, and then I went to the park that day. I sat down and I was looking at the trees, and suddenly I was like, "Whoa, everything's in 3 dimensions." I couldn't believe it. Like, that's how everybody else sees? It was amazing. The path from reading to replication. Eyeglasses redirected civilization. When other cultures did fine work, the skill was entirely in the hand, passed down by habit, making every piece unique. Without lenses, unique handcrafted artifacts. With lenses, precision, measurement, batch production, mass production. The exact same glass that helped an old man read manuscripts eventually allowed humanity to discover bacteria and the stars, invented in Low Countries 1600. All right, so it looks like we're moving um, from glasses to other types of instruments. So it looks like there's two main benefits from glasses. The first main benefit was that you have these extremely intelligent and extremely experienced people that in the past would have run out, like their career would have just like reached the end of their career because they can't see anymore. And then now you're giving them the ability to do very precise work for much longer periods of time in their life. And then on the other hand, then these people are starting to use this same knowledge in other fields. And then when you put eyeglasses, like for example, into some kind of instrument like a magnifying glass or a telescope, then it's also developing other types of knowledge. The key machine of the modern world, not the steam engine, not the printing press, the clock is the key machine of the modern industrial age. Before the late 1200s in Italy and England, time was the sun's business. Shadow sticks and water clocks drifted with sediment, failed in the cold, and were utterly useless during weeks of cloud cover north of the Alps. Clock. How do you design your day? I have a I've been coaching business coaching. It's not exactly business coaching, but it's more like about thinking tools and how do you think through different problems when you want to solve a problem. And so I have a series of thinking tools. I have around 15 to 20 tools that I can teach to people, and then they can use those tools to think through problems. Often when I start teaching about thinking tools and thinking um, methodologies, I ask people a very, very simple question. And we ask, like, okay, so what's the difference between a presentation tool and a thinking tool? And some people are like, presentation tool. So a presentation tool, it's like you speaking. It's like, how do you present? And then some people are smart and they say, "Hey, like, what do you mean? Like a slide presentation?" I said, yeah, exactly. Like a slide presentation. And they're like, okay, yeah, what's the difference between a presentation tool and a thinking? So what's a thinking tool? And thinking tool is a much harder thing to describe. Usually I have to show them something like a SWOT analysis for them to understand what a thinking tool is. All right. So we have categories, something like positive and negative. And then we have another category, internal and external. And when we bring those two categories together, then we have something called a strength or a weakness or an opportunity or a threat. So a thinking tool is something that enables you. Let's take a look at the game pieces. Definition is here. So a thinking tool helps you to categorize and understand data and make decisions. And that's what the thinking tools are that I teach. It's to help people to categorize and understand data. All right, let's get back into here. So what's the most simple tool? Like, what's the most simple tool that everybody uses? The most simple way to categorize data is a calendar. But according to this idea, before the 1200s, when people didn't have a clock, how did they organize their day? So then now it's like based on the sun's position. Like, for example, how does the church know when to ring the church bell? I suppose that's the reason why they have a church bell, because it's like, ding, 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 ding. It's like, okay, everybody, it's time, because you don't really know what time it is. Imagine not knowing what time it is, like never knowing what time it is. When do we go to church? So, and then they have the bell, like the dinner bell, like outside of your house when when your kids are out working on the farm, and then they ring the bell, time to eat. I mean, but that was life. The life was basically just an agricultural experience. You were out working until it was time to eat, and then you're at home. You're reading until what? Until it gets dark, and then you use your candles until your eyes get tired, or until what? Until you just go to sleep. Amazing. A secular revolution disguised as machinery. Church time. I hear it as church time. God's hour followed nature. Daylight had equal divisions, meaning the length of an hour varied widely with the seasons, controlled by bishops. Town time followed mathematics. Hours were exactly the same length all year round, registered by the church for nearly a century. What does that mean? Daylight had equal divisions, meaning the length of an hour varied widely with the season? What does that even mean? Public town hall clocks became the ultimate symbol of municipal authority, secular, precise, answerable to no bishop. Huh, interesting. But I mean, what do you mean you divide it? So are you saying that okay, so we have like morning time and afternoon time? The world's first digital device, analog continuous flow, digital discrete counting. The clock was a philosophical revolution. Sundials and water clocks were analog devices tracking a continuous flow. The mechanical clock counted discrete repeating actions, the swing of an oscillating controller. The 13th century built this without knowing what it truly was. Today, even high precision instruments, from atomic clocks to modern computers, run on this exact same principle. Time. So the first thing that we did after we can see is created time. No, the first thing, we're in the 13th century, so we got to go back. So the 12th century. All right. So what is this? When did we have eyeglasses? 1286. And when did we have this? The wheel. The 1000 years. So it looks like this was one of the first inventions. Okay, so in the last video we talked about um like there's this Gulf Stream. So there's like all of this hot, I mean relatively warm water and rain that comes here year round. And so you have constant flow of water. But the problem was this area was full of trees. And then once there was the Iron Age or the Steel Age, then they were able to cut down these trees. So I guess this is around 700 and 800 AD. Okay, so then once they had the trees cut down, then they started changing the path of the rivers. And then once they started changing the path of the rivers and they had this steel, they could work with steel, then they made their first engine, large engines. Then once they got the glasses, then they could start making smaller engines. Okay, I could see now. It's funny. The invention of productivity. Before the clock, the worker labored task to task. After the clock, human performance could be measured against uniform time units. The clock didn't just measure time, it created the economy as we know it. This paved the way for Adam Smith's central insight about the productive power of labor. For the first time in history, humanity could ask how much output per hour. Yeah, and this is really interesting stuff because the thing is that now we have these AI tools, and it's just like it's similar to the concept of the engine. Remember last time we were talking about this thing called triz. So triz is like T. If we talk about a technical system, there's basically a working element, the transmission, the engine, and the control element. All right. So what about in our picture here? What do we have? I think it's easier to see it if we go to this one. All right, so where's the working element? The working element, so we can see on the first floor, it's where this wheel is touching the it's where it's crushing the wheat. It's where it's crushing the grain. That's the working element. All right. So what else is so what's attached to now we have the transmission. What do you mean transmission? So how is it that this working element is able to move? So that means you can see there's like some kind of thing here. So this all of these gears connected to each other are called the transmission. It's transmitting the energy from the water into the working element. Next is the engine. So the actual in this case, the actual engine, it's the water touching, hitting these pieces of wood. It's this wheel, and it's the ability for the wheel to capture the energy from the water. Just like in a car, it's the your engine, like a 6V engine, the piston, that is the ability to capture the energy from these blasts of fire. And the energy of that engine is then put through this transmission, and then the transmission of gears is what puts it eventually attaches to the working element. So finally, we have oh, now we have a word from our sponsor. So here's one tool. This is the tool I've been working on for a while. The thing I'm working on this week with this tool. Okay, so let's first of all, I updated the API, so now we're using a different method. All right, so let's say we want to read for 30 minutes each day this week. All right, so this should work much better. I'm using why is it an unregistered caller? Doesn't make any sense. All right, let's take a look. So if I run into this problem, how would I solve it? I would probably go to Google AI Studio and I would see if there's any API keys that are available. Yes, and then I would copy this API key, and then I would switch out my API key, save the key, and it should now work. You see how much faster it is now? So, because I was using the 3.1 version of the API, I changed it to the 2.5 version, which is way faster. Okay, set a timer for 30 minutes each day. Okay, so how are you going to set a timer for 30 minutes each day? So I also added a new feature where you can click this box, and then how do you do it? I don't actually know how to do it. Ah, here it is. So you can click set the alarm. Let's set the alarm for. Uh, hmm. All right, so it's not quite working yet, but as you can see, we're still working on a few kinks. Now, the other way you can do it is let's put this item into the dial left, and let's put this one into the dial right. There we go. Now, what we're going to do today is we're going to set the timer for 30 minutes. Let's go to the Pomodoro page. Now, there we go. For some reason, there's no task select. All right, so right now we're working on this alarm section. And this is based on the methodology of the Fogg's motivational model. And in Fogg's motivation model, basically, we have two issues. One is Fogg's behavioral model, images. Yeah, so let's use this one. All right, so up here we have the target behavior. Doesn't seem to like this. Good. All right, it's clear. Okay, so up here is the target behavior. This is like we want to have this behavior. And then down here is like we don't have the behavior, it's not happening. You can see here's the behavioral activation threshold. So if there's something in your life that you want to do. For example, let's say you want to read for 30 minutes a day. So down here, maybe you're saying, well, low motivation. I don't really feel like it's something I should do, but I'm not really doing it. And then, or you have low ability. It's like, actually, I don't know how to read. So if you don't know how to read, then you need to increase your ability. And how do you increase your ability? The best way to increase your ability is to take a, like how do I read, right? So you take a task like learn how to read and then break it into smaller steps. Right? So this is called a facilitation trigger. So if you have low ability, then what you need is a facilitation trigger. And if you have this facilitation trigger, it's more likely that you're going to get over the behavioral activation threshold. Another problem that you might have is maybe you have low motivation. So maybe you say, well, actually, I have a lot of ability. I know how to read, but I'm here. I have such low motivation. I just can't seem to get over the behavioral activation threshold. Now, in that case, my recommendation is that you set a timer. And so maybe not today, but soon you're going to be able to use my app. All right. So the current focus is read for 30 minutes. So here it is. I'm going to start the timer. Boom. All right. So this is called a Pomodoro timer. And the Pomodoro timer is what is going to help you to stay focused for 25 minutes and get that thing done. That's not actually the one what I was trying to explain. What I was trying to explain is down here in the alarm section. What you would do is you'd set up an alarm so that your alarm would actually go off and say, "Hey, it's time to read." And then after the alarm goes off, then you can click play and actually start reading. There you go. Let's get back to the show. All right, so here you go. So it says, see, we're talking about productivity, the power of productivity, and now that we have a clock, we can now divide labor into what it says human performance could be measured against uniform time units. And that's really what it's all about. When it comes to this app, what we're trying to do is we're giving ourselves like a piece of time. And if we're able to give ourselves time, a specific time to do the task, and then a certain amount of time to work on the task, and then that gives us the what it's called a spark trigger. And then if we can take the task and break it down into smaller pieces, that's called a facilitation trigger. Now, when we get our results, we can start to measure those results. And that's what it's talking about is measuring the results of human performance. That's really the wild thing because we were able to use machines to do a lot of our labor and we were able to increase our productivity substantially. And now we're using AI, which is really quite amazing because, as I'm making this video right now, actually on the side of my, I mean, you can't see it, I can see it, but like on the side, I also have like a software coding tool that's open on my other screen because I've been well, as you can see, I'm actually producing a piece of software. So as we're looking at this, I'm actually debugging this issue right here where I want to be able to have shared projects because I want to be able to use like this same I want to be able to add a task on my computer and then at the same time I can also see that task on another computer without having to sign up as a user to the app. So that's what we're working on right now. I'm not sure what it's going to look like in the long term, but as you can see now, there's one person in sync with this. So if I add a task here, well, you can't add a task because it says that you have to have two devices connected before you're able to add that task. Anyways, so now we got AI, which can like do a huge amount of work for us. So we have more and more tools, which is helping us to increase our productivity more and more. All right, let's move forward. Printing paradox, invention versus explosion. So in China in the ninth century, invented invented printing, but the state controlled publication. Confucian orthodoxy discouraged dissent. Basic canonical texts were everywhere, but new dangerous thought was suppressed. A mathematician's advanced work was printing, but no one understood it, and the knowledge died with him. Huh. See, this is interesting. Paper. Paper. It's such a magical thing. So somebody developed this. They invent these eyeglasses. This person, if it's not, you see, this is actually similar to what we're talking about with AI, because what we were talking about earlier is machines. And machines, they were actually a physical representation of some kind of engineering feat. And so once the person made it, once you invented the clock, then everybody, you had a clock. And then another person, they could look at that clock, they could learn from that clock, they could learn from somebody, and then eventually they could make another clock, or they could fix the whatever, the water, the windmill or the water mill or whatever those things are called. Okay, but what about in China? So in China, there was like this group of leaders, and they didn't actually want anyone to. They didn't want certain ideas to spread. And the best thing to do is, if you don't want ideas to spread, is don't let them be written down. Now it's like the world is so decentralized, so like all information is available to everyone, and it's just a matter of like, are you looking for it? Can you understand it? It's more about, can you understand it? Do you believe it? Do you have a community who also believes in it? Is there, and also, is there some kind of value? Is there some utility in this type of knowledge? Like right now in the world, we're facing an issue where Iran and Russia and China, they've developed systems which are, even under sanctions, they're still growing and getting more powerful. And where the US, they developed a system which is starting to die down. And the question is like, why is America becoming what it is? Why are these other countries becoming what they are? What are the ideologies and the systems behind these governments and behind these people? What is it about China that continues to give people the desire to produce more surplus, to create a surplus, and then to give some of that surplus to their government in the form of taxes? And what is it that gives the people in Russia the courage to go and fight a war? And why is it that they're able to go out and fight for their country? What is it that gives them that willingness to lose their life for their country? And why is it that Iran is like not backing down to something where in the past the US was able to kind of just go in and, I don't know, just impose their will, but now suddenly we have a situation where Iran's like, no, we're not going to do it anymore. We're not going to put up with this anymore. It ends here. It's a strange world that we live in. So now we're not so stuck on this issue of like paper, because now everybody has access to all knowledge. But now it's like, I think it's more about organization these days. Political fragmentation fueled freedom. So no single emperor or pope could stop the press in Europe. The church tried to suppress vernacular translations and dissenting texts, but it was completely overwhelmed. Italy alone printed an estimated 2 million books before the 1500s. The demons of heresy were out long before Luther, and printing made it impossible to get them back in the box. Meanwhile, Islam refused the printed Quran for religious reasons, and India waited until the 19th century. Control. Gunpowder, chemistry versus engineering. In the 11th century China, they used it for incendiary noise and fear, valued the theater of violence, eight-sided magical awe-inspiring wind and fire cannon. Whereas in England, applied bell founding metallurgy and learned to corn the powder, make distinct kernels instead of fine dust for faster, complete explosive ignition. China invented the recipe, Europe built the weapon. So the thing about Europe is like they would measure it. They would measure exactly how much force, and they were able to repeat the same shot. So like let's say you have 10 cannons, and all of the 10 cannons are the same size, and then all of the balls are the same size. then is it possible to produce gunpowder so that every single time that every single cannon with that exact ball size and that exact amount of gunpowder is put in that machine, it's going to hit exactly the target that you're expecting. It had to have that kind of precision before it could have the confidence to go. And then what? And then the British Empire went and they took over the whole world with this, with just a little puny little cannon. The tragedy of orthodoxy, the zenith of Islamic science. From 750 to 1100 AD, Islamic science vastly outpaced Europe. Europe was the student, recovering classical heritage through the frontiers of Spain. The distribution of orthodoxy. Progress halted when religious orthodoxy declared the ultimate truth already revealed. Science that didn't explicitly serve faith was deemed heresy. A civilization that burns its libraries stopped learning. Huh. So the tragedy is that once you have a group of people and they're satisfied, like truth, we have like in my religion, there's this one passage. It says, a Bible, we have got ourselves a Bible. There's no more need for a Bible." And like the argument is for people that read the Book of Mormon, and it says like, "Hey, I already have my Bible. I don't need a Book of Mormon." And when I was younger, I didn't really understand what do people mean when they say that. So if you become a missionary and you go to another country and then you say, "Hey, I got this message for you," and then the question is, how open are they to knowledge and how open are they to listening to your message? So I was a missionary, and I remember there was this one house. It was a beautiful house in Dorsey, um, Massachusetts. Dorsey, where's Dorsey? I don't remember where Dorsey is. Massachusetts. Dorsey, is it Massachusetts? I mean, it's no, it's Vermont. It's Vermont. Dorset, Vermont. So I lived in Dorset for about 6 months or so, and at the time, it was like the town that had the most millionaires per capita in the United States. Now, as you could see, there's not that many houses. Dom DeLuise lived here. I went to Dom DeLuise's house. It was quite a wild experience. East Dorset. I don't know where to put it here. East Dorset. Let's go to East Dorset. I'm pretty sure it doesn't have. Okay, there's nothing here. I'm sure it doesn't have the like most highest percentage of billionaires anymore. Back in the day, it had the highest percentage of millionaires in America. I don't know where Dom DeLuise's house is. I can't remember. Anyway, so one day we were walking down the street, went into some neighborhood, and we were knocking on doors because we wanted to talk to people about. And outside of the door, I was talking. Oh, this doesn't look like a very high percentage of millionaires. Oh man, this is a long time. This is what it looks like. Wow, that was a long time ago. So we were outside the front door of this lady's house, and we were talking about like this exact topic. Like if you weren't born in your church, if you weren't born a Muslim, if you weren't born a Christian, if you weren't born a Russian, if you weren't born a Chinese, how open would you be to some new religion, to some new methodology? And I was like, I don't know. I think I'm pretty stubborn in my thinking, and I think it's difficult for me to come to some new understanding. And then suddenly, like, there's like a speaker, like, "Hello, who are you guys?" And then we're like, "Hey, we're missionaries. We're here to talk to you about Jesus." And then she's just like, "Okay, I'll be there in a minute." I was like, "What?" I think she was listening to us the whole time. And so the guy, like the husband, he was a diamond salesman. He was telling us stories of like when he was carrying like cases of diamonds. It was fun. It was nice. They were actually really devout Christians, and they had like some program that they followed in their own church. So they had like a community church. They had friends. They had a community. Dorset, Vermont. Let's do churches. network. Church near Dorset, Vermont. Church near Dorset, Vermont. United Church of Dorset. I'm like, oh, there's only one church. So this is obviously the church that they were going to. So everybody in the community goes to this church. So there's no chance that, anyone's going to change and go to a different church, because like this is their community church. This is their whole community. It's really hard to get a community uh, to turn away from their community religion and join your strange religion that you're bringing in. But that's the closed-mindedness that stops innovation. And when you have this the stopping of innovation is what, there's one point that economists say that it's like, if you want your economy to grow, you have to just, there's a lot of weaknesses, there's a lot of issues, there's a lot of things that are stopping your economy from growing. And if you remove those things that are stopping your economy from growing, then your economy will grow much faster. So for example, let's say that you believe the the philosophy or the concept that when the government produces a good or service, it generally costs about twice as much as when the private citizens produce the same good or service. So in this case, if we accept that it generally costs the Canadian government twice the price to produce the same amount of goods and services, then we should be trying to figure out how to have more privatized systems. We should have fewer government systems. But as you see, if we look at the actual way that Canada is working, we can see there's actually more and more government services. There's more and more government employees. And so more and more of our money are going into these less efficient companies. And once you got a person working for the government, that's it, man. They're never going to shut down. They're going to fight tooth and nail to keep that government organization alive. They need to get paid. So suddenly now our private citizens we're getting taxed 30%, 35%, 40%, 45%. Once you're getting taxed 45%, then the question is, are we still incentivized to work? Like, if I'm going to pay 45% of my income to the government, then like, what am I getting back for that money? And what is the ideology? Do I believe in my country? Do I believe in Canada? Do I believe in our common our common system? And sometimes what you have is orthodoxies or governments which are shutting down this kind of free thinking. Totalitarian trap. What, this looks even worse. The setup: China had every ingredient for an industrial revolution, water driven spinning machines 500 years before England, 11th century iron production, the compass, paper, printing, and gunpowder. The trap: regression took hold because the state controlled everything, monopolies on salt, iron, tea, clothing, foreign trade. It is the state that kills technological progress in China by creating an atmosphere of routine, traditionalism, and immobility where any incentive not commanded in advance is suspect. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people who think that innovation can only happen with freedom. And once you add those restrictions, then your innovation is going to suffer. The invention of invention, continuous progress. Number one, respect for manual labor. The Judeo Christian ethic elevated the worker. God told Noah to build the ark, he didn't build it for him. Dominion over nature. Nature was viewed as a resource to be harnessed, not a sacred spirit or God to be feared. Number three, linear time. Society adopted a belief in progress toward a fundamental better future rather than an endless loop returning to a golden past. And number four, the free market. Innovation actually paid off. A decentralized society meant no single emperor would arbitrarily confiscate your meal or your success. China had the ingredients, Islam had the head start, Europe had the freedom. 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 Thanks for joining me with another chapter. next week we are going to be jumping into to two new books. One is called Manias, Panics, and Crashes, and the other one is called The Intelligent Investor. So we will see you next week with a new topic. I think eventually we will eventually, yeah. So no, that's week one. Okay, so looks like week 7 is going to be, we're going to be more specific about Canada. Yeah, so for the next couple of weeks, we're going to be talking about some different topics from different books, which will be fun and interesting. I think eventually, look, so the week 8 to 17 is, we're going to be really focused on the China Mirage and the Intelligent Investor. Weeks 18 to 30, we're going to be here back to Manias. Look, Lance. Okay, so we do eventually get back to this book. Thanks for joining me, Space Between Ideas, and we'll see you next week.